What's good, y'all? It's time for another video, and this one we'll be talking about two crazy banners, the upcoming normal and the upcoming ancient banner for this weekend, because they already have been announced, but because a lot of you care about it, let's talk about this update announcement and if I or anybody knows anything specific as of this moment. So 3 hours past reset on the 21st of August. There's still nothing known in regards to the update. So let's talk about things that are actually known, and that is going to be the weekend card pool preview. And holy, do we have a couple of banners on our hands.
Our research begins.
So, the most important banner is actually right here. Time limited summon with 15x rate up. And that 15x rate up is actually Hex and FERSSI. Now, if I had to judge this banner, it is probably one of the most disgusting and strongest banners we ever had in this game. Reason being that most of the time, if we get a strong legendary, we get a banner with like one good legendary and then one meh legendary. Like for example, when did we have that? Like, I guess it was Hex Resort. So basically you get the drift, right? You have one you really want, one that is quite nice, and then you have one that would be like the downer of the banner. And if you look at Hex and FERSSI, out of the two of them, I wouldn't really even say that one of them is the downer. So, what makes these characters so good? What else do we have as banners? Should you summon? And how good is VALDERON? Those are questions we'll be answering right in this video. Alright, so let's have a look at the other summonings. We also have a 2x rate up for Divines and Invocational Spirits, as well as the special ancient summoning containing VALDERON and Admiral Claw, as well as obviously the 15x being applicable to Blues and Divines. So, honestly, let's go through the epics real quick because those are super simple. Cyclone, you don't want. Theowin, you confuse. And Titus, if you can make a Titus really tanky, especially with this very special set right here you can get from the Gearforge, where you have the ability to regenerate. Let me see if I can find it. Right here, which gives you the ability to recover some extra HP. Titus can be a bit of an extra monster. Like, Titus can be a real monster, but you really have to make him tanky. And honestly, pulling a Titus copy shouldn't be that difficult, and his awakenings really aren't that crucial. So overall, not that crazy. Honestly, not that crazy when you look at these units. So who are the crazy people? Huh? Obviously Hex and FERSSI. So why don't we start with Hex? Huh? Hex is the first one in the banner. Let's have a look at Hex and let's see what makes Hex so great. So, straight off the bat, something we're not going to find in the gallery is that Hex is by far the unit with the strongest exclusive artifact in existence. Hex's exclusive artifact basically enhances his kit and increases his damage by ridiculous margins, sometimes up to 100%. And yeah, that is straight up information you can't get out of the gallery. What you can get out of the gallery is his kit though. So the way Hex works is, if we start with his talent, he gains a card of fate, and that card of fate he gains basically after each attack, and if he has 4, he has the chance to get either the Temperance card, which allows him to throw 3 cards dealing extra damage as well as inflicting a slow, the Death card dealing a big amount of damage and inflicting a burn, or the Strength card, which increases his attack by 30% and its attack speed by 70%, which is also one of the reasons why you can very well build your Hex with lower attack and higher crit damage. Now the rest of his kit is pretty simple. With his magic attack he starts throwing cards, his general range is the one of a marksman. The interesting part about Hex is he is a magic damage dealing marksman instead of a piercing one. Now we have this passive right here, Fate's Trial. An attack has a 15% chance to inflict stun, going up to a 20% chance, and increases the damage dealt to targets inflicted with CC effects like Stun, Freeze, Immobilize state by up to 60%, which overall is pretty incredible. And you can really combine that pretty well with like Boreas or any other sources of stun, but it isn't that important. Same with Fate the Hermit. When triggered by receiving damage, resists incoming damage and gains invisibility. It can only be triggered every 40 seconds. It is really helpful in Gear Dungeon 2, and overall it's more of a niche thing and more for like progression rather than like actual endgame content, but it is a nice and niche talent that can allow him to survive in situations where others couldn't. Now we come to his most important part, Mad Truth. When triggered, increases his damage by 100% and his attack speed by 100, reducing the attack interval by 50% and replaces all cards with the Joker. The damage increase goes up to 140% and the effect duration goes up to 35 seconds, which is next to a Zilla 2A3 the longest ultimate in the entire game. Furthermore, you can reduce the skill cost down to 900. Now, what does the Joker do? The Joker does 400% damage 3 times and inflicts burning for 5 seconds. So it's kind of a mix between... it's basically an increased death card in a sense. Now, what truly makes Hex special isn't just his kit, which puts him into one of the strongest single target damage dealing units in the entire game, but it is his Awakenings. So let's have a look at Hex's Awakenings. During the effect of Mad Truth, there's a chance to draw the Fool. The Fool, in comparison to his normal, the Joker card, does 100% more damage and also inflicts a slow. So 100% more damage per damage instance. So overall 300% more damage, and you also get the slow rather than just the burn. The Fool is what makes Hex pretty freaking good, and his A1 is already a big jump in power. Now the A2, 300 attack, pretty straightforward, pretty good. Then we have the A3, doing the effect of Mad Truth, performing basic attacks against targets inflicted with burning, extends the duration of Mad Truth by 1 second. So the way this works is obviously pretty simple explained. And it is kind of similar to Idrit's ultimate, where you can just enhance the duration, also again being kept at 30 seconds. And what this does is basically it can take your Hex from a 35 second to a 65 second ult. And especially in Guild Boss or Guild Boss 1 or Guild Boss 2, you can basically chain ultimates if you rotate it well. Like for example, the moment your Hex goes out of his ultimate, he will already be back again to go back into his ultimate. Then we have the A4, which gives 5% penetration increase, and now the A5. Each draw returns 1 card of Fate and increases each damage dealt by the Joker and the Fool. So if he is in his ultimate, he gets a straight up 30% damage boost to the Joker and the Fool. And the way his ultimate works is he will attack 4 times, then draw a card. With this one, he'll attack 4 times, draw a card, get back one of the cards to draw a card. So he now only needs 3 attacks to draw a card rather than 4. Overall increases his damage by a ridiculous degree. Like, it is incredible what kind of numbers a Hex at A5 can truly pull. And that really starts to come to fruition if you combine it with his exclusive artifact. So let's have a look at what people are currently doing with the Hex in the world rankings. Right here, for example, only 244 million, pretty low, 287 million. But see, this is even the cool part. A Hex at A3, obviously with its exclusive artifact, but a Hex at A3 can reach up to 287 million. And depending on if you play like an Ajax to reduce magic resistance and whatnot, and really focus on Hex, you can see Hex can put out some absolutely ridiculous numbers. So overall, my judgment for Hex and my recommendation for Hex for you would be, let's once more, why not, let's go to my own Hex. My recommendation for you would be, depending on where you are with your Hex. Alright, number 1, you do not have Hex, get a Hex. Number 2, you have Hex A1, work your way towards Hex A3. Number 3, you have Hex A3, work your way towards Hex A5. Those are obviously recommendations and obviously don't need to be followed, especially if you're tight on resources and are looking for another hero that obviously has some really ridiculous awakenings like Lust, because Lust apparently is pretty close to coming back, so you might not want to splurge all that much on Hex, because once more, Hex is also, Lust is like Hex, where her A1 is good, her A3 is decent, but her A5 is absolutely ridiculous. So yeah, now that we went through these guys, let's have a look at a character that I don't even own. Let's have a look at the character that I don't even own. And let's talk about why FERSSI is so fucking important. Alright, number 1, after 5 seconds without performing any healing, so if there's downtime between your characters getting hit, his next healing will be increased by 100%. Pretty nice, pretty straightforward. Furthermore, he has your usual Vortex / Hollow / Elowen ult range, and also he does attack based healing to one ally with a 20% multiplier. Then we have Sands Bestow. Whenever an ally in range receives AoE damage, their received healing is increased by 10% for 10 seconds, and this effect can be triggered every 40 seconds, goes up to 20% increased healing, can be increasing by 12 seconds, and can be triggered every 35 seconds, so pretty nice. And now comes the part that makes FERSSI unique, the part that makes you desire him, and the part that makes him, next to Elowen, the strongest healer in the entirety of Guild Boss 2, and that is Sand Aegis. Applies AoE damage reduction to allies in range. This damage reduction starts at 5% and goes up to 25%. If you do pull a FERSSI, this is the same as with an Elowen. You want her Rage Region maxed, you want the Sand Aegis maxed on FERSSI. So that is your goal right there. And then you have the ultimate. The ultimate is pretty straightforward. Heal allies by 100% multiplier and also apply 15% inspiration to 3 allied units with the highest attack for 10 seconds. His healing multiplier will go up to 140%, inspiration effect to 20, and the cost down to 800. The way you can use this is, you know, when the boss in Guild Boss 2 uses his hand to go over the field, he'll have a single hit where the hand hits your units, reducing their health, and then the stones drop. And the way you use FERSSI's ultimate is by healing them after they get hit by the hand but before the stones drop, which heavily increases your survivability. But overall, FERSSI's main selling point is Sand Aegis right here. And we'll have a look at the Guild Boss 2 leaderboards in a bit. Let's just go over the Awakenings real quick. Once the Sand Bestower is triggered, restores HP equal to 40% of FERSSI's attack. Honestly, not that important. 300 attack, not that important. Trigger effect of this, not that important. A4 Rage Region auto, decent but not that important. Increasing the healing multiplier by 20% for 10 seconds after receiving AoE damage. Pretty good, but pretty unnecessary. The most important part is, if you do not have a FERSSI, get one. Do so. So yeah, let's have a look at the Guild Boss 2 ranks real quick, and you see something very peculiar. A FERSSI, a FERSSI. Okay, let's go to the world rankings, why not? We have a FERSSI, 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 a FERSSI. You get it, right? So even with people hitting in the high hundreds of millions, or hundred thousands, 185,000 with a A0 FERSSI. Isn't that incredible? So this is what you're supposed to do. Get yourself a Hex if you don't have one. Get yourself a FERSSI if you don't have one. And overall, this is one of the best banners to pull on, unless you want to save specifically for Lust. But this isn't all. There is still one more banner we obviously need to talk about, and that right here is VALDERON and Admiral Claw. So let's have a look at Admiral Claw first. Save VALDERON, save the best for last, and let's quickly talk about him. Admiral Claw is one of my favorite characters in the entire game because of his character design and because of the synergy in his kit. Now let me give you a bit of that synergy. Keep in mind, If you go down, if you go down to 40% HP, you get 30% penetration. That's good and all. If you attack every 3 attacks, he reduces his HP and increases his damage by 2%, basically up to 6% permanently, which can stack up to 10 times. So you get a 60% damage increase and a 30% increase in penetration. Then you also have the fact that you turn into Bloodstorm Annihilator. Bloodstorm Annihilator increases your attack interval, but also increases your attack, so overall you do more damage. Furthermore, he changes ranged attack a bit, and every attack now reduces the current HP by 5%, rather than every 3rd attack, as well as dealing 180% damage in comparison to the normal 120% damage that he does. So overall, already you get 30% penetration, 60% damage increase, a stronger basic attack that does 160% damage, which is probably the strongest basic attack in the entire game. And his basic attack also has the ability to pull in enemies that are outside of his melee range, pulling them to them and stunning them. And then lastly you have Carnage, because it isn't already enough. When in the Bloodstorm Annihilator stage, so after doing 30 attacks, he increases his damage to enemies whose HP is below 60%, going up to 40% by up to 30%. So you have the Carnage. And all these factors together should make Claw a pretty amazing character. But let's talk about his issues. Alright, let's talk about his issues. Let's look at his range first. So it's your normal like arrogance range. In Arena he gets like 2 tides to the side rather than longer range. So, Soul Lasher sounds pretty great. Soul Lasher sounds like something you want for Guild Boss 2. Now the issue is, for whatever reason, they decided to remove the stun upon Bloodstorm Annihilator. So once he enters his most powerful state, he cannot stun with it anymore. And the biggest issue with Admiral Claw and most chaotic units in general, besides like Valeria and probably VALDERON, is the inability to have a reliable way to keep the unit's HP low. Because what you really want to do is basically run Admiral Claw at 40% of his HP permanently, but you don't really get a chance to do so in most scenarios. And let's say you wanted to use him in Guild Boss 1, you would probably have to sacrifice a space to put in like a Chameleon if something goes wrong, or otherwise find a different way. So even though we do have the Somi, we're still looking for that perfect chaotic nightmare support. So overall, here's a unit with a great kit, great synergy, but no real place to apply it because he's too hard to keep below 40% HP. And also he has a tendency to pull units to himself, killing himself in the process. Which leaves us with the best for last, and that is VALDERON. So, what can VALDERON do? Why is he so great? And why do I want him? Why do I want him? He looks pretty awesome. In my opinion, he's the most awesome looking character in the entire game. Furthermore, he's male. He's not a lust baiting trap. He is just a awesome looking demon with a huge ass sword. And that's pretty much my reason for going for him. Furthermore, he's a fighter that has a 2-tile range. His stats are absolutely ludicrous at 30k HP, 6600 attack, as well as a 2.6 attack interval. And yeah, furthermore, he has a cost of 19, reduces his deployment cost to 14 in Arena. VALDERON is a menace in Arena. How much of a menace is VALDERON in Arena, you might ask? You get the sentence right. Oh, come on, bring me to the screen. So, how much of a menace is VALDERON? Here we have VALDERON in single target arena. We have VALDERON in once more single target arena. Not here. VALDERON in all 3 arenas. VALDERON in single target arena. Basically, VALDERON is really good at the highest end of arena, specifically the single target one, and he has a good enough synergy with other Chaos Dominion units to still make him worth to be brought as a lord. Now, good enough synergy refers to the fact that VALDERON is probably the most selfish lord of them all. What does he do? So he increases faction members' attributes by 15%, which is pretty normal, and he has the standard faction team members damage increases based on their lost HP up to 60% at 30%, once more something you want to keep Admiral Claw low for. But then when VALDERON is deployed, he deals damage equal to 50% of the current HP to the 3 nearest units, could be yours, could be enemies, excludes and elites and bosses, and he increases his damage rate by 30% as well as reducing his damage by 20%. Straight up, 30% more damage, 20% damage reduction. And per unit he damaged with his deployment, he increases his damage by up to 45% and is reduced damage taken by up to 35%. So 45% more damage, 35% reduced damage taken as a base for his kit. And that is basically all that is going to him rather than anybody else. Now what else can his kit do? He has a talent. Basic attack has at least a 25% chance to trigger Chaotic Annihilation. Instead, a lower HP grants a higher chance to trigger Chaotic Annihilation, reaching its maximum chance of 50% when the HP falls to 30%. So Chaotic Annihilation is basically just a stronger basic attack that deals 270% damage to one enemy and extra 20% damage up to 5 enemies, giving him a bit of AoE rather than just dealing 120% with his normal attack. And as said, the lower his HP, the higher the chance to trigger Chaotic Annihilation, which is pretty ridiculous considering it is a 50% chance. And also Chaotic Annihilation isn't replacing his basic attack, it goes alongside of it. Next up we have Carnate, which is one of probably most hard to use talents. But the way VALDERON works is he can prevent fatal damage as well as then restore 30% damage, as well as gaining a stack of Karma of the Fallen if he takes fatal damage. Karma of the Fallen reduces his attack by up to 45% and damage by up to 45%. Basically, if you get more than 2 stacks of Karma of the Fallen, VALDERON starts to turn useless. That's kind of what you need to keep in mind. Now, the way you can circumvent getting these stacks and basically giving VALDERON infinite revives is by making use of something called Chaotic Vitality. So, if VALDERON gains Chaotic Vitality, he will be protected from getting a debuff after dying for the next 5 seconds. We'll get to how to get Chaotic Vitality in a bit. Now, Chaotic Annihilation, which is a special talent with up to a 50% chance, he restores 30 rage as well as he gets 20% total rage, up to 30% if an ally dies on the battlefield, and this rage actually goes up to 50 rage per Chaotic Annihilation hit, which is at low HP a 50% chance, which is overly ridiculous and makes him an incredible unit getting incredible amounts of rage. So now Chaotic Vitality, which we already talked about. If VALDERON activates his ultimate, the only thing he does is get a buff. He does nothing else besides getting this buff right here. He loses 10% of his current HP, as well as increases his attack by 25% and crit damage by 25%, which is pretty straightforward. Furthermore, because it wasn't enough already, he inflicts vulnerability on nearby enemies during the effect duration, because why the fuck wouldn't he? Now, this attribute increase for each stack goes up to 15%, so he actually gains 40% attack, 40% crit damage. Now what you can do is use Potent Surge. Potent Surge means VALDERON can recover above 100% rage, going to 200%. So VALDERON can trigger his ultimate in an empowered state, granting him 2 rather than 1 stack of Chaotic Vitality, which then fills out this stacking condition. So VALDERON could have 20 seconds of losing 20% HP per second, as well as gaining 80% attack and 80% crit damage, which is obviously incredibly ridiculous and ultimately overpowered. So the way VALDERON can avoid death is by timing his ultimate. So you want to trigger his ultimate in a window of 5 seconds before him dying, which leads to him not accruing the debuff and still dealing the massive amount of damage, as well as getting a free 30% HP restore. That is how incredibly ridiculous VALDERON is. But it doesn't stop here. VALDERON still has Awakenings. So, when deployed, gains 1 stack of Chaotic Vitality. You can pretty much imagine it as VALDERON ults on deployment. That is pretty much the way you can imagine this. A2 increases faction team members' damage by 5%, as well as a 300 attack increase. Pretty strong. During the Chaotic Vitality, the hero's attack ignores 50% of the target's defense. If VALDERON is an ultimate or placed, he ignores 50% of the target's defense, which is so ridiculous that it makes it one of the strongest Awakenings in the entire game, bar none. Then we have the A4, penetration increases by 8%, so even more penetration against defense. And then when Chaotic Annihilation is triggered, so at a 50% chance of every basic attack, he casually increases his attack speed by 130 for 5 seconds. VALDERON is a mantle package. VALDERON is one of the strongest lords in the entire existence, and you can fight me for VALDERON being the strongest solo unit in the entire game when it comes to ground-based ones. Alright, this has been this incredible upcoming banner, which sadly still doesn't make up for the fact that the update isn't here yet. So developers, the fuck is the update? Peace!